The wooden floorboard cracked under Evelyn's weight as she stumbled backward, her hands trembling against the crumbling adobe wall. 4 pairs of eyes watched her from the doorway, hungry, cold, terrified. Outside, the New Mexico desert stretched endlessly, swallowing the last traces of daylight. The empty cupboards mocked her. The broken heater wheezed its final breath. She had sacrificed 13 years for a dying woman's promise, only to inherit this abandoned prison in the middle of nowhere. But as her fingers pressed against the hollow sound echoing from within the wall, something shifted, something that would change everything. Before we begin this emotional journey, there is something important to ask. If stories like Evelyn's touch your heart, please subscribe to the channel. We are working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue bringing powerful, emotional stories that inspire and move you. Your support means everything. Now let's dive into Evelyn's world. The desert sun beat mercilessly against the windows of the Whitmore estate as Evelyn Harper folded the crisp white linens with practiced precision. Her calloused hands moved automatically, muscle memory born from 13 years of service. Through the window, she could see the sprawling grounds of the property, manicured gardens that contrasted sharply with the wild New Mexico landscape beyond the gates. Margaret Whitmore sat in her velvet chair, her frail body barely making an impression in the plush cushions. At 84, her sharp eyes remained alert, following Evelyn's every movement with an intensity that had once intimidated the younger woman. Now, after more than a decade, Evelyn understood that intensity masked something else entirely: loneliness. The grandfather clock chimed 3 times. Evelyn checked her watch discreetly. Lucas would be getting out of football practice soon. Anna had a science project due tomorrow. Noah needed help with his reading homework. And little Grace, 6 years old now, probably wondered why Mommy was never home for dinner. "You're thinking about them again," Margaret's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Evelyn startled, nearly dropping the pillow she'd been fluffing. "Mrs. Whitmore, Don't apologize." The old woman's expression softened, a rare occurrence. "I know what this job has cost you." The words hung heavy in the air. Evelyn thought about the school plays she'd missed, the birthdays celebrated over rushed phone calls, the tears she'd wiped away through video chats when Noah fell off his bike and wanted his mother. Her sister Clara had stepped in, bless her heart. But it wasn't the same. Children needed their mother, and Evelyn's children had learned to live without hers. She'd taken this position 16 years ago, shortly after her husband David died in a construction accident. Lucas had been an infant, cradled against her chest as she'd stood in this very foyer, desperate and grieving, begging for the live-in caregiver position. Margaret had hired her on the spot, not out of kindness, Evelyn learned later, but because she saw someone who had nowhere else to go. The work was relentless. Margaret demanded perfection in everything: meals prepared exactly on time, medications administered without error, the house maintained to impossible standards. But it was the emotional labor that truly drained Evelyn. Margaret's children, Richard, Elaine, and Thomas, visited perhaps twice a year, their obligatory appearances marked by thinly veiled impatience and transparent greed. "How much longer does she have?" Richard would ask the doctors in stage whispers, as if his mother had already departed. Elaine would walk through the house with an appraiser's eye, mentally cataloguing her future inheritance. Thomas, the youngest, simply avoided eye contact with everyone, including his own mother. Only Evelyn remained constant. Through Margaret's hip surgery, through the long nights when pain made sleep impossible, through the gradual fade of a once vibrant mind into something fragile and frightened, Evelyn held her hand through it all. The other staff had come and gone over the years, unable to tolerate Margaret's exacting standards and caustic tongue. But Evelyn stayed, partly because she needed the salary, partly because beneath the difficult exterior, she'd glimpsed the terrified woman nobody else bothered to see. "They'll come like vultures when I'm gone," Margaret said suddenly, her gaze fixed on the window. "My children. They'll pick this place clean before my body's even cold." "Mrs. Whitmore, you shouldn't talk like that." "Why not? It's the truth." Margaret turned to look at her, and for the first time in 13 years, Evelyn saw something that looked like gratitude in those faded blue eyes. You could have left 100 times. God knows I gave you reason enough. Why did you stay? Evelyn set down the pillow and moved closer, kneeling beside the chair so she could meet Margaret's eyes at level. The truth was complicated. The money, yes. She needed it desperately, sending most of it home to Clara to help raise her 4 children. But there was something else, something harder to articulate. Because everyone deserves someone who won't abandon them, Evelyn said quietly. My husband used to say that the measure of a person isn't how they treat those who can help them, but how they treat those who can't. Margaret's hand, paper-thin and spotted with age, reached out to grasp Evelyn's. The grip was surprisingly strong. You were the only one, Margaret whispered, the only one who didn't leave. The weeks that followed felt like watching sand slip through an hourglass. Margaret's health deteriorated rapidly, her moments of clarity becoming increasingly rare. Evelyn barely left her side, sleeping in the chair beside Margaret's bed, monitoring every labored breath. On a cold November evening, as the desert wind howled against the windows, Margaret's eyes fluttered open one final time. Her hand sought Evelyn's in the darkness. You were the only one who didn't leave me, she repeated, her voice barely audible. Promise me something, Evelyn. Anything, Mrs. Whitmore. Don't trust my children. They're vipers, every one of them. They'll try to... A coughing fit interrupted her words. When she finally caught her breath, her next words were urgent, almost desperate. The house in the desert, the one everyone thinks is worthless. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Promise me you'll keep it. I promise, Evelyn whispered, not understanding but unable to deny a dying woman's final request. Margaret's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Good girl. You always were too loyal for your own good. Those were her last words. Margaret Whitmore died at 3:17 in the morning, her hand still clasped in Evelyn's. As Evelyn gently closed the old woman's eyes, she heard footsteps thundering up the stairs. Richard, Elaine, and Thomas had arrived, summoned by the doctor's call. They'd made it just in time to claim their inheritance, but not in time to say goodbye. What secrets had Margaret hidden from her children, and why did she warn Evelyn against them in her final moments? The reading of the will would reveal truths that nobody expected. The next morning, the air inside the Whitmore estate felt different, thinner, charged, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, the sky over Santa Fe was a hard, pale blue, the kind that promised cold even when the sun shone bright. Inside, the warmth of Margaret's presence had vanished, replaced by the faint scent of antiseptic and the echo of hurried footsteps on polished wood. Evelyn stood at the base of the grand staircase, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Overnight, the house had transformed. Nurses had left, the doctor had gone, and what remained was the quiet before the storm. Portraits of stern Whitmore ancestors stared down as if presiding over what came next. Richard Whitmore appeared first, his suit impeccably pressed, his expression tight with impatience. At 49, he carried himself like a man used to authority, his gaze sweeping past Evelyn as though she were part of the furniture. "Has the attorney arrived yet?" he asked, directing the question to no one in particular. "In the study, sir," the housekeeper murmured, her voice trembling. Elaine followed, her heels tapping sharply against the hardwood floor. At 45, she still clung to the last shreds of a youth spent chasing prestige. Her perfume lingered heavily in the air, floral and expensive, almost suffocating in the closed space. Thomas trailed behind, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched. None of them asked how Margaret's final hours had been. None of them asked where their mother's body was being taken. Their focus was already elsewhere. "The sooner we get this over with, the better," Elaine muttered, brushing invisible lint from her blazer. "I have a flight to catch tonight." Evelyn swallowed hard, standing near the doorway of the study, but not daring to step inside. The attorney, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a stack of papers, sat behind the heavy oak desk. Sunlight cut across the room, illuminating dust motes that swirled lazily in the air, indifferent to the grief, greed, and tension coiled inside those walls. "Mrs. Harper," the attorney said, glancing toward her with a brief nod. "Please come in. You are included in the will." The words startled her. Included. She had never once allowed herself to imagine that Margaret would leave her anything. Her salary was already more than she'd ever expected when she took the job, fresh in her widowhood, clinging to survival. Still, hope was a fragile thing, and it flickered now, however faintly, deep in her chest. Richard's mouth tightened. "Is that really necessary?" "It is not only necessary," the attorney replied evenly. "It is legally required. Your mother's wishes will be read in full." Evelyn stepped inside, staying close to the back wall, eyes downcast. She thought of her children, Lucas likely checking his cracked phone between classes, Anna sketching in the margins of her notebook, Noah practicing multiplication tables, Grace counting the minutes until she could run into her mother's arms again. Everything she did, every sacrifice, every humiliation endured, was for them. The attorney cleared his throat, unfolding the top page of the will. "This is the last will and testament of Mrs. Margaret Elise Whitmore." The room stilled. "To my eldest son, Richard Whitmore," he began, "I leave the primary Santa Fe estate, including the main house and surrounding land, as well as my portfolio of investments and accounts associated with it." Richard's shoulders straightened, satisfaction flashing briefly across his face. "To my daughter, Elaine Whitmore, I leave the vacation property in Taos, the mountain cabin, and all associated furnishings and accounts." Elaine exhaled, a faint, relieved laugh escaping her. Her fingers tightened around her handbag. "To my youngest son, Thomas Whitmore, I leave the ranch property near the state border, including the livestock and water rights, as well as the vehicles associated with its maintenance." Thomas looked up then, surprise breaking through his habitual detachment. The ranch was no small gift. Land, water, assets, power. "And finally," the attorney continued, his voice steady, "to Mrs. Evelyn Harper, who has dedicated 13 years of her life to my care when others turned away, I leave my secondary property, a house situated in the desert region outside a small town in New Mexico. The title and all associated rights are to be transferred to her immediately." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Evelyn blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. A house? In the desert? The memory of Margaret's last words stirred within her. The house in the desert. "The one everyone thinks is worthless. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Elaine broke the silence with a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Is this some kind of joke? That place?" Richard's eyebrows arched, the edge of a smirk forming. "Mother left her the shack." Thomas looked away, his discomfort evident, but he said nothing. "Ahem," the attorney said, scanning the next lines. "Per Mrs. Whitmore's explicit instructions, Mrs. Harper is to vacate the Santa Fe estate within 30 days. During that time, she may continue to reside in her current quarters and will receive her final salary and standard severance. After that, the property will legally and physically transfer to Mr. Richard Whitmore." Evelyn felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. 30 days. 30 days to uproot the life she had built here, however imperfect, however lonely, and start over somewhere in the middle of a desert she had never seen. The thin thread of hope she had allowed herself snapped. "So that's it," Elaine said, incredulity laced with cruelty. 13 years of service and she gets the abandoned box in the sand? "Legally, it is a habitable property, fully owned by the estate," the attorney replied, though even his tone carried a quiet sympathy. "Your mother was clear on this." Richard turned then, his gaze settling on Evelyn for the first time, as if finally acknowledging her existence. "You'll be leaving as soon as possible, I assume," he said. "No reason to drag things out." Evelyn's cheeks burned, shame and anger warring inside her. In their eyes she saw only contempt. 13 years of missed birthdays, lonely holidays, and whispered reassurances to crying children who fell asleep, clutching pillows instead of their mother's hand, reduced to a single dismissive glance. "I'll leave within the 30 days allowed," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "As the will states." "Good," Richard replied. "There's a lot to manage here. We don't need complications." Elaine sighed dramatically. "Honestly, Mother always did have a flair for melodrama. Leaving you that place, it's practically a punishment." Thomas shifted, finally speaking up, his tone quieter than his siblings. "It's done, Elaine. The will is signed. Arguing now doesn't change anything." Elaine shot him a look, but fell silent. The attorney finished reading the remaining clauses, details about minor assets, charitable donations, and legal language that blurred into background noise for Evelyn. Her mind was already racing ahead, a house in the desert, nowhere else to go. 4 children waiting for a future she had no idea how to provide. After the reading, the Whitmore siblings swarmed the attorney with questions about appraisals, transfers, taxes. Evelyn slipped from the room unnoticed. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the walls closer, the air colder. She found herself in Margaret's bedroom one last time. The bed was neatly made, the medical equipment removed, the room stripped of life. Only the faint indentation on the mattress betrayed that someone had spent their final days there. She stood at the window, looking out at the stark beauty of the sky and the distant mountains etched against the horizon. Outside those gates, somewhere far beyond the comfortable streets of Santa Fe, lay a forgotten house that now belonged to her. "Evelyn?" The attorney's voice came from the doorway. She turned, wiping at her eyes quickly. "I'm sorry, I was just saying goodbye." He nodded, stepping into the room, a folder in his hands. "Mrs. Whitmore left specific instructions for you. Here are the documents for the desert property, deed directions, and a small envelope she asked me to give you personally." He handed her a thin, cream-colored envelope with her name written in shaky handwriting. Evelyn recognized Margaret's script immediately. Her chest tightened. "Thank you," she murmured. "If you need help understanding any of the legal documents, my office is available," he added. His gaze softened. "Your work here did not go unnoticed, even if some choose to forget it." After he left, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means I was brave enough to do in death what I could never quite do in life. Trust you completely. The house you inherit will look like a burden. Everyone will tell you it's worthless. That is exactly why I chose it for you, because only someone who knows how to endure hardship would see beyond appearances. Remember what I told you. Do not trust my children. They never understood what truly matters. But you do. Margaret." There was no mention of anything more, no explanation, no map to hidden treasure or confession of long-buried secrets, just a cryptic reassurance and the echo of her final warning. Evelyn folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. The humiliation from the will reading still burned, but beneath it now was something else, a question that refused to be silenced. Why this house? Why her? She thought of the children again, of their hopeful faces each time she promised that one day things would get better. For 13 years she'd survived, not lived. Now, with nowhere else to go, this forsaken house in the desert had become their only chance. Leaving the bedroom, she walked through the halls one last time, each room carrying the weight of countless unspoken moments. By the time she reached the servants' quarters, she already knew the answer to the question echoing in her mind. She would go to that house. She would take her children. She would make it work. No matter how barren, how forgotten, how unforgiving the desert might be, she would face it. Because there was no alternative. And because somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and fear, a tiny ember of defiance still glowed. As she closed the door to her small room and began packing the few belongings she truly owned, a chill ran through her. Margaret's words replayed again, louder this time. The house in the desert. The one everyone thinks is worthless. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Evelyn believed she had reached the lowest point of her life, forced into an abandoned house with 4 children and no resources. But in the silent, crumbling walls of that desert home, the first clue of a buried secret was waiting, one that would turn her misery into a dangerous kind of power. Before the story continues, there is something important to ask. If Evelyn's journey is moving your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Reaching 1,000 subscribers helps keep stories like this alive, so more people can feel, reflect, and find strength through them. Your support turns these moments into something much bigger. Evelyn did not remember the drive itself, only fragments of it, gusts of sand skimming across the highway, the endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desert, the way the sky seemed too big, almost heavy. Lucas sat in the front seat beside her, arms folded, eyes fixed on the horizon. Anna, Noah, and Grace huddled together in the back, their belongings stuffed into worn backpacks and plastic bags at their feet. The small town disappeared behind them faster than Evelyn expected. A few gas stations, a shuttered diner, a faded billboard about a local festival long past. Then nothing but open land and distant, jagged silhouettes of mountains. The directions to the house were written in the attorney's careful handwriting, but the road itself seemed determined to swallow them. "This can't be right," Lucas muttered, squinting at the handwritten notes. "It says to turn off at a dirt road near mile marker 62, but I don't see— Wait, there, I think that's it." Evelyn slowed the aging car and turned where the pavement dissolved into a rough, dusty track. The tires protested, bouncing over rocks and ruts. The children jostled in their seats. "Mom, my stomach hurts," Noah complained softly. "We're almost there," Evelyn said, trying to sound certain. "Just a little longer." The landscape grew harsher the deeper they went. Sagebrush, dry grass, patches of cracked earth. The sun glared down, making the air shimmer. In the distance, something small and square finally broke the monotony. "That's it," Anna whispered, leaning forward between the seats. The house sat alone on a rise of packed earth, an aging adobe structure with faded sun-bleached walls and a sagging roofline. Its small windows were dark, like half-closed eyes. A wooden porch leaned tiredly toward the desert, one of its support beams visibly cracked. Evelyn parked the car and turned off the engine. Silence crashed over them. No passing cars, no distant hum of the city, no neighbors' voices, just the low whistle of the wind and the faint rustle of dry plants. Grace slipped her hand into Evelyn's. "Is this really our new home, Mummy?" The word home lodged in Evelyn's throat. The humiliation from the will reading rose again. Elaine's laugh, Richard's cold amusement. This house was the punchline to a cruel joke. Still, as she looked down at her youngest daughter's hopeful eyes, Evelyn knew what she had to say. "Yes," she said gently. "For now, this is our home." They unloaded in a quiet rhythm. A thrift store kettle, a few pots and pans, a thin stack of clothes, a shoebox of school papers and drawings, a worn blanket that still smelled faintly of baby powder from when Grace was small. All the pieces of a life reduced to what could fit in the trunk of a car. When Evelyn pushed open the front door, a cloud of dust rose, making everyone cough. The air inside was dry and stale, as if it hadn't moved in years. The main room was simple. A cracked concrete floor, an old wood-burning stove, a narrow hallway leading to 2 small bedrooms. "There's no electricity," Lucas said after flipping a dead switch several times. "Maybe it was shut off," Evelyn replied, though there was no visible wiring, no outlets on the walls. The house felt older than it looked in the photographs, like something built before convenience had reached this corner of the world. Anna brushed her fingers along the wall. "The paint's peeling and— is that mold?" Evelyn's heart sank. The adobe walls, once smooth, were spider-webbed with fine cracks. In some places the plaster had flaked away, revealing the rough earthen layers underneath. The windows were coated in grime, dimming what little light tried to enter. The pantry was almost bare. A few rusted cans, an empty glass jar, and a nest of dried leaves in one corner. The small sink sputtered when she turned the handle, producing a muddy trickle before going silent. "Is there at least water?" Lucas asked. "I'll check outside," Evelyn said, forcing her voice into calm. "Maybe there's a pump, or a well." There was, in fact, an old hand pump a few feet from the back door. Its metal handle was stiff with rust, but after several determined attempts, a thin, brownish stream of water finally dribbled out. It slowly turned clearer as she kept pumping, her arms burning with the effort. "Bring me the buckets," she called to Lucas. They spent the next hour gathering water, sweeping out the main room, shaking dust from the thin mattresses left behind. The sun sank lower, turning the sky a bruised orange and casting long shadows across the floor. With no electricity, the gathering darkness came quickly and without mercy. By nightfall, the temperature dropped sharply. The desert, cruel in a different way after sunset, pressed its cold hands against the thin walls. Evelyn found a few leftover logs stacked behind the house and managed to coax a small fire in the stove. The flames flickered weakly, painting the children's faces in warm light that did little to fight the chill. They ate the last of the sandwiches they had packed for the drive. It wasn't much, just bread, cheese, and a few slices of meat, but it quieted the aching in their stomachs for the moment. "Mom," Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper, "what about tomorrow? What are we going to eat?" Evelyn hesitated. In Santa Fe, food had been something she purchased carefully but consistently. Here, the nearest store was miles away, and their money was thin. Just the final paycheck, a modest severance, and what little she had managed to save. "We'll figure it out," she said. "There's a small town not too far from here. I'll go in the morning and see what we can afford." Lucas stared into the fire. "And after that? We can't stay here long term. This place at Mom, it's falling apart." Evelyn looked around at the cracked walls, the sagging ceiling, the patched-up windows. He wasn't wrong. The house felt fragile, as if one strong windstorm might knock it to the ground. "Maybe we won't have to," she replied, though her chest tightened around the uncertainty. "Maybe this is just a step, a beginning." The words tasted hollow even as she said them, but she clung to them because the alternative, admitting she had brought her children to a nowhere place with no plan, was unbearable. As the night deepened, the wind grew stronger. It howled around the corners of the house, slipped through invisible cracks and made the windows rattle. Grace curled up against Evelyn, shivering. "It sounds like the house is crying," she murmured. Evelyn tightened her arms around her. "It's just the wind, sweetheart." They all tried to sleep, huddled together in one room for warmth. The thin mattresses pressed against the cold floor did little to soften the hardness beneath. Each sound outside, the distant bark of an animal, the shifting of branches, the groan of the old structure, kept jolting Evelyn awake. At some point in the deepest hours of night, the fire began to die. The cold reached her bones and hunger stirred again, sharper now that the distractions of the day had faded. By the time morning came, grey and muted, the children were quiet and pale. The small stash of food in their bags had dwindled, and what remained would not last long. Evelyn's stomach twisted, not just from hunger but from the knowledge that her children were depending on her in a place where she had nothing to rely on but willpower. She sent Lucas with her to the nearby town, following the direction signs until they reached a small main street with a grocery store, a hardware shop, and a cafe with fogged-up windows. Their money bought little: a bag of rice, some beans, a few canned vegetables, a loaf of bread. Every purchase felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Back at the house, they cooked over the stove, the meager meal a comfort nonetheless. Warmth, even in small bites, steadied them. But as the days passed, the reality of their situation settled in like dust. The nights grew colder, the wind more relentless. The roof creaked ominously during a storm, sending small showers of dirt down into the corners of the room. One evening, as Evelyn ran her hand along the longest crack in the living room wall, she felt a deeper tremor, not from the house, but from the fear inside her. If this place failed them, there was nowhere else to go. It was that same crack that caught her attention the next week. A jagged line running from the ceiling almost to the floor, it seemed to widen daily. She stood before it, brow furrowed, fingers tracing lightly along its uneven edges. The adobe beneath the thin plaster felt rough and cool. "We need to patch this," she said to Lucas. "If it spreads, the wall might weaken too much." He shrugged on his jacket. "I'll see if the hardware store has something we can use, maybe cement or filler." While he was gone, Evelyn gathered what she had: a chipped trowel someone had left in a corner of the porch, a small bucket, some leftover mud from cleaning the pump area outside. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. She ran her hand along the wall again, listening to the faint, hollow echo her touch produced. Hollow. She paused. The sound was different from the rest of the wall, softer, as if there were space behind it. Her heart beat faster. She pressed again, this time using her knuckles, tapping lightly along the crack. Most of the wall responded with a solid, dull thud, but along that thin, vertical line, the sound changed, empty, like a drum. She swallowed, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. The younger children were in the back room drawing on scraps of paper. The wind had eased for once. It was just her, the wall, and that strange, hollow sound. Evelyn fetched the old trowel and returned to the crack. She hesitated only a moment before scraping gently at the plaster around it. The top layer came off in dry flakes, revealing darker, older material underneath. The hollow sound grew clearer. It could be nothing, she told herself. Old construction. A gap in the adobe. But deep beneath her fear and exhaustion, something else stirred. A whisper of Margaret's voice, the memory of that letter, that warning. The house you inherit will look like a burden. She dug a little deeper. As the dust fell around her feet and the crack widened under her careful work, the house seemed to hold its breath again, just as the estate had the morning after Margaret's death. Only this time, Evelyn wasn't there as a servant. She was there as the one thing nobody had expected her to be, the rightful heir to whatever secrets these walls had been guarding. The trowel struck something that did not sound like packed earth. A hard, faintly metallic ring echoed through the room. And in that small sound, Evelyn's world shifted. In the fragile silence of that forgotten house, Evelyn had just uncovered the first sign that Margaret's last gift was not humiliation, but a hidden invitation. When she broke further into the wall, what she would find would not only change her future, but put her directly in the path of those who would rather see her lose everything than claim what was meant for her. The metal sound didn't echo loudly, but it was sharp enough to silence every thought in Evelyn's mind. For a second, she simply froze, trowel pressed against the exposed patch of wall, her breath caught in her chest. Dust floated in the thin band of light coming through the small window, turning the air between her and the crack into a hazy curtain. She swallowed hard and tapped again, this time with her knuckles. The sound was unmistakable now, dull around the edges but with a hollow metallic note in the center. There was something behind the adobe, something that had no business being there in a forgotten desert house. "Mum?" Anna's voice drifted from the hallway. "What are you doing?" Evelyn glanced back quickly. "Stay with your brothers and sister, honey. I just need to check something on this wall." Anna lingered for a brief moment, curiosity flickering over her face, but she sensed the tension in her mother's tone and backed away, disappearing around the corner. Once she was sure the children were out of sight, Evelyn tightened her grip on the trowel and scraped more aggressively at the plaster. Chunks fell to the floor, revealing a darker frame of compacted adobe around a narrow, uneven rectangle. Her heart pounded so violently she could feel it in her fingertips. "Don't let them convince you otherwise." The words from Margaret's letter surged back, threading themselves into this moment like a prophecy. The house will look like a burden. She worked faster now, sweat beading at her temples despite the chill in the air. Every scrape brought more of the hidden shape into view. There was definitely a cavity, narrow, vertical, about the width of her shoulders. The metallic note had come from somewhere near the center of it. As the plaster gave way, she finally reached a point where her fingers could slide into a small gap. The adobe around it felt rough, but beyond that gap, the surface changed, cool, hard, flat, metal. Her throat went dry. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the empty room. "Okay, just breathe." She widened the opening enough to peer inside. At first all she saw was darkness. Then, as her eyes adjusted, a faint outline emerged. A box, rectangular, metal, and old. Its corners were softened with time, and a layer of dust covered it like a second skin. She didn't think. She reached in with both hands, fingers scraping against the frame of the wall as she tried to get purchase. The box didn't budge at first. It felt wedged in, as if the house itself were reluctant to let it go. Evelyn braced her feet against the cracked floor and pulled harder. With a harsh rasp of metal on adobe, the box finally shifted, drawing forward an inch, then another. Her arms ached, but she kept pulling until, with one final jerk, the box slid free and tumbled into her arms. She staggered backward, nearly losing her balance. The weight of it surprised her, heavier than it looked, solid, undeniable. "Mom?" Lucas's voice came from the doorway. She turned sharply. He stood there, his hair tousled from the wind, cheeks flushed from the cold outside. His gaze dropped to the box in her arms, then to the jagged hole in the wall. "What is that?" he asked. Evelyn looked down at the box. It was grey with tarnish and rust tracing the edges. A small corroded latch clung stubbornly to the front. "I found it in the wall," she said quietly. "Help me put it on the table." Together they cleared a space on the small wooden table near the stove. The box landed with a heavy thud, sending a puff of dust into the air. Anna, Noah, and Grace edged closer, eyes wide. "Is it locked?" Noah asked. "Looks like it," Lucas said, examining the latch. "But it's old. I think we can force it." Evelyn hesitated. A strange sense of reverence crept over her. This wasn't just an old box. It had been hidden on purpose, sealed inside the wall of a house that the world considered worthless. Someone had meant for it to stay concealed until the right person came along. She thought of Margaret again, the rare, fleeting softness in her voice when she'd spoken of the desert house, the warning about her children, the letter. "Let me," Evelyn said. Lucas stepped back. She wrapped a cloth around her hand to shield her skin and gripped the rusted latch, trying to force it upward. It resisted at first, the corroded metal refusing to yield. She gritted her teeth and applied more pressure. With a dry, cracking sound, the latch snapped open. The children leaned in. Inside, there was no dramatic shimmer, no gleam of gold catching the light. Instead, there was a neatly folded layer of faded fabric, perhaps a piece of cloth used to cushion what lay beneath. Evelyn lifted it carefully, her fingers shaking. Beneath the cloth there were stacks of worn envelopes bound with twine, each one fat with papers. Tucked between them were several small velvet pouches, their edges frayed with age. And under those, resting flat against the bottom of the box, were plastic sleeves filled with documents, deeds, certificates, papers that looked far more official than anything she had ever touched. "Are those letters?" Anna whispered. "Some of them," Evelyn said. Her eyes were drawn to the velvet pouches. She picked one up, surprisingly heavy for its size, and loosened the string. When she tipped it slightly, a cluster of small objects slid into her palm. Jewelry. Not the costume pieces she'd sometimes seen in department store windows, but solid, substantial items. A gold bracelet, its links intricate and delicate. A ring with a deep blue stone that caught what little light there was and scattered it back in a quiet fire. A pair of earrings that looked too valuable to belong to a forgotten desert house. Grace gasped softly. "They're pretty." Evelyn stared at the pieces in her hand, her mind racing. The value of just this one pouch could be enough to feed her children for months, maybe more. And there were more pouches, more envelopes, more secrets. She set the jewelry down gently and opened another pouch, more gold, another ring, a chain. Each item carried weight, not just physical, but symbolic. This was wealth, hidden wealth, deliberately concealed. "Mom," Lucas said slowly, eyes now fixed on the documents inside the plastic sleeves. "You should see this." He handed her one of the sleeves. She slid out the document inside and unfolded it. The paper was thick, slightly yellowed at the edges. The legal language was dense, but certain words jumped out at her. Title, ownership, land. Her eyes scanned the page again, and her pulse hammered in her ears. The document was a deed, not just to the small patch of land beneath the house, but to a far larger property. Acres of land in a nearby region, with mineral rights and water rights detailed in precise legal terms. Another sleeve revealed a different property, this one closer to a growing town. Another held records of investments, accounts, statements, numbers that blurred, but carried the unmistakable weight of financial value. "This can't be real," Evelyn whispered. This doesn't make sense." "Why would something like this be here?" Anna asked. Because she didn't trust her children. The answer came to Evelyn like a fragment of a voice carried on the desert wind. Margaret had been wealthy. Anyone who stepped onto her Santa Fe estate could see that. But this was different. This wasn't the wealth everyone knew about, fought over, or measured. This was hidden, surrounded by dust and silence. Lucas reached for one of the letters tied with twine. There's a name on this one. It's addressed to you, Mum. Evelyn's breath caught. On the front of the envelope, written in the same shaky script as the letter she'd already read, were the words, "To Evelyn, when you find what they were never meant to have." Her fingers fumbled with the twine before she finally freed the envelope and opened it. The paper inside was thinner than the others, folded carefully. "Evelyn, if you have found this, then you have done what I knew you would do. You stayed. Anyone else would have walked away from that house the moment they saw it. They would have sold it, abandoned it, or complained until it was taken off their hands. But not you. You never chose the easy way, even when it broke your heart. What you see in this box is the part of my life I could never trust to my children. I watched them grow into people who measured worth only in what they could display. I needed someone who knew that real value can live in quiet places and in sacrifices no one applauds. This is my true inheritance. The land, the accounts, the jewelry, they are all legally tied to the deed of the house you now own. My attorney knows of their existence in general terms, but not their location or extent. I kept that secret to protect it from greedy hands. You are to use this, not to live like them, but to live free. Do not tell my children what you have found. They will not accept that I chose you. They will try to twist the law to intimidate you, to make you believe you have no right to what is yours. But everything in this box has been transferred, on paper and in record, to your name. I am sorry for what my world cost you and your children. I cannot give you back those lost years, but I can give you what they never truly deserved. If you stayed, if you endured, it was because you were always more than a caregiver. You were the only one who knew how to love someone with nothing to offer in return. Use this well, Evelyn, and please do not forgive me too quickly. Margaret." By the time she finished reading, Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. The children were utterly still, the only sound the low hum of the wind against the windows. "Mum," Lucas said softly, "does this mean we're—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Rich, safe, free. The words hung unspoken between them. "It means," Evelyn said, her voice trembling, "that what everyone thought was worthless isn't. It means we might have a chance to start over, really start over." Hope didn't burst into the room all at once. It crept in slowly, like dawn over the desert, soft, pale, cautious. But it was there, undeniable in the weight of the metal box, the shine of the jewelry, the official stamps on the documents bearing her name. For the first time in years, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine a life where every decision wasn't dictated by what they lacked. A life with a real home. A school where her children wouldn't have to explain why their clothes were worn and their lunches small. A doctor's visit that didn't come with a knot of dread about the bill. She gathered the jewelry and documents carefully, tucking them back into the box. This house, which had seemed like a cruel joke, now hummed with a new kind of tension. Possibility, risk, because Margaret's letter had carried a warning too. They will not accept that I chose you. Evelyn looked at her children, at Lucas's protective stance, at Anna's searching eyes, at Noah's cautious smile, at Grace's unfiltered wonder. This box could change everything for them, but only if they could keep it safe, only if no one else found out. The desert outside was quiet, deceptively so, but secrets never stayed buried forever. And somewhere far from this small cracked house, the Whitmore siblings still believed they had claimed the best of their mother's world. They had no idea that her true legacy had been hidden where none of them had cared to look. Yet, behind the fragile safety of that discovery lay a looming danger. As word of Evelyn's sudden change in circumstances began to leak into the small town and beyond, not everyone saw her good fortune as something she deserved. Some saw it as something that should have been theirs, and they were willing to do whatever it took to reclaim it. The metal box sat at the center of their small wooden table like a third presence in the room, changing the air, the light, even the way they all breathed. Outside, the desert wind traced invisible fingers along the walls, but inside everything had narrowed to one fragile, powerful truth. They were no longer as helpless as the world believed. For the first few days, Evelyn moved carefully, as if one wrong step might cause the secret to vanish. She hid the box beneath a loose floorboard in the bedroom she shared with the girls, making sure the wood slid back into place without a sound. At night, after the children slept, she would take out one document at a time, tracing the words with her eyes, memorizing the names of banks, properties, and account numbers. The nearest town felt different too. When she drove in to buy groceries, she found herself walking lighter, standing a little straighter. The fear that had once clung to every purchase, each dollar feeling like a sacrifice, eased slightly. She didn't splurge or draw attention, but she bought a little extra. Fresh fruit for the children, a thicker blanket, a second pair of shoes for Lucas. It was subtle, but people noticed. At the checkout counter, the clerk, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, glanced at the pile of items on the conveyor belt, and then at Evelyn. "You new around here?" she asked, scanning a bag of rice. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "We moved into the old house out past the ridge." The clerk paused. "Whitmore Place?" Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the counter. "It belonged to Mrs. Whitmore, yes. I've inherited it." The woman's brows lifted. "Huh. Didn't know she left anything out here worth inheriting." Neither did they, Evelyn thought. On the drive back, dust trailing behind the car like a thin veil, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The desert, once just harsh and empty, now felt like a witness. Every mile between the town and the house became a fragile strip of privacy she could feel fraying. It started with a phone call. The signal out there was weak, and most of the time her old phone struggled to connect. But one afternoon, as the children did homework around the table, a faint buzz rattled across the surface. Evelyn glanced at the screen. Richard. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't given him this number. He must have gotten it from old records or from someone at the estate. She swallowed and stepped outside before answering, the dry air biting at her face. "Hello?" "Evelyn," Richard said, his voice smooth in that familiar, practiced way. "I trust you're settling into your new accommodations." She stared out at the horizon, where the sky met the land in a hard, thin line. "We're managing," she said. "What do you need, Mr. Whitmore?" A small chuckle drifted through the receiver. "Always so formal. No need for that now. I'm calling as a courtesy. You see, my siblings and I have been reviewing some of Mother's asset history, old properties, transfers, that sort of thing." Her grip on the phone tightened. The wind picked up, whistling against the edge of the house. "We realized," he continued, "that the desert house is technically part of a larger network of holdings. You can imagine our surprise when we discovered just how much was tied to that little patch of nowhere." So they knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. "You had the will read," Evelyn said carefully. "The house was given to me. Your mother's instructions were clear." "Oh, the house is yours," Richard replied. "We wouldn't dare challenge that. What I'm saying is, its real value is far beyond what you probably understand. Those papers can be confusing, burdensome even. Managing land, accounts, rights, it's a lot for someone in your position." The insult slid in neatly, coated in politeness. "I'm sure I can learn," Evelyn said, her voice low. "I'm sure you could try," he answered. "But why would you want to? Here's what I propose. We buy the house from you, quickly, cleanly. You get cash in hand, no complications, no legal headaches." A generous gesture, really. Her heart started to pound. "How much?" He named a number. It sounded big, bigger than anything she had ever held in her life. For a split second, the temptation hit. Pay off every debt, move into town, get a normal job, let the world go back to something that made sense. But the number Richard offered, against the numbers she had seen on those documents in the box, wasn't generous. It was insulting. "I'll think about it," Evelyn said. "Don't think too long," he replied. "Opportunities like this expire. Call me back within a week and perhaps we can be even more accommodating." The line clicked dead. Evelyn stood outside for a long time, the phone cold in her hand, the desert stretching silent around her. When she finally went back inside, Lucas studied her face, concern tightening his features. "What did he want?" he asked. "To buy the house," she said, hanging up her jacket. for much less than it's worth. So they know, he said. Not everything, she replied, but enough to feel threatened. The next sign came at night. It was past midnight when a sound dragged her from sleep, a low crunch of gravel, the soft squeal of tires turning slowly, cautiously. The house was cloaked in darkness, their only light a small lantern left flickering in the hallway. Evelyn froze, listening. There it was again. Footsteps, not the scattered padding of small animals, but deliberate measured steps circling the house. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Grace, and crossed to the window. The glass was fogged at the edges, dust clinging to the corners, but she could make out enough. The faint gleam of headlights turned off but still hot, the ghostly outline of a truck parked a short distance from the porch. Her breath caught when she saw the shadow of a man moving toward the back of the house. She moved quickly then, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. In the small room where the boys slept, she shook Lucas's shoulder. "Wake up," she whispered. "Now, stay quiet." His eyes snapped open, instincts sharpened by years of watching her carry silent worry. "What's wrong?" "Someone's outside," she said. "Get Noah. Take your sisters into the back room and don't make a sound. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Understand?" He nodded, fully awake now. "Do you have your phone?" "Yes." He squeezed her arm once before slipping past her to gather the others. Within moments, the soft rustle of movement in the hallway faded as the children clustered in the back room, the door shut firmly behind them. Evelyn grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a rusted crowbar she'd discovered on the porch weeks ago, and moved toward the front door. Her heart thudded in her ears, but her mind sharpened with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She cracked the door open just enough to look out. Two figures moved along the side of the house, their flashlights held low, beams angled away from the windows as if they knew someone might be watching. One of them tested a window with gloved hands. The other scanned the desert as if expecting company. They weren't teens playing a prank. They moved like men with purpose. Fear surged, cold and electric. But beneath it, something hot rose too. Anger. This house, this dirt, this fragile safety, she had bled for every inch of it. No one was going to take it from her children. She closed the door soundlessly and backed away. In the narrow hallway, she dialed the small-town sheriff's office with shaking fingers. It rang twice before a tired voice answered. "Sheriff's Department." "This is Evelyn Harper," she whispered. "Out at the old Whitmore Desert House. There are men outside trying to get in." The voice on the other end sharpened. Questions came quickly. How many, what they were doing, whether anyone was hurt. She answered as best she could. "Stay inside," the sheriff said. "Lock the doors. I'll send a unit. You're a long way out. We'll get there as fast as we can." She hung up and moved through the rooms, locking every door and window she could reach. At one of the back windows, she heard the soft scrape of metal against glass, a probing, testing sound. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to speak loud enough to carry through the wall. "I've called the sheriff. Law's on its way." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't care. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then hurried footsteps. A muffled curse. The slam of a truck door. An engine roaring to life. By the time she made it back to the front window, headlights were already bouncing away, swallowed quickly by the dark sea of desert. She waited there, crowbar still in hand, until the distant red and blue glow finally appeared on the horizon. When the patrol car pulled up, the deputy stepped out slowly, one hand resting near his holster, flashlight sweeping over the house. "You the one who called?" he asked. "Yes," she said, her voice raw. He looked around, studied the tire tracks near the porch, the marks on the back window. "They knew what they were doing," he said quietly. "Didn't break anything, just checking." "Checking what?" she asked, though she already knew. "What you've got," he answered, meeting her eyes. "Word travels fast in small places. Folks at the bank talk, folks in the clerk's office talk. A widow inherits a worthless house and suddenly has money for more than canned soup. People notice." Her cheeks flushed, shame and frustration mixing into something bitter. "We haven't flaunted anything," she said. I've done everything quietly. Doesn't take much, he replied. Sometimes it's not what you do, it's what people think you might have. He took a breath, then continued, his tone more formal. Ma'am, until we know more, you need to be careful. Keep your doors locked. Don't tell anyone else about what you've inherited. If I were you, I'd talk to a lawyer, make sure everything's documented and protected. Evelyn nodded slowly. I already have one, she said. The same one who handled Mrs. Whitmore's will. I'll call him in the morning. The deputy's gaze lingered on her for a moment, as if weighing whether to say more. Then he tipped his head toward the house. You've got children in there. That makes you a lot more visible than you think. Just remember that. After he left, the house felt different again. Not just poor or secret or hopeful. It felt hunted. The next day, when she reached the attorney on the phone, his tone carried a new urgency. Evelyn, listen to me carefully, he said. You need to move the bulk of those assets out of that house. The documents, the jewelry, anything not tied to the physical deed. I can help you secure them in town. Bank vaults, legal filings, transfers. Right now, they're only as safe as your walls. She glanced at the cracked plaster, the patched roof. That's not very safe, she admitted. No, he agreed. And Mrs. Whitmore knew her children. If they've started circling, they won't stop easily. Especially if they suspect more was left than they were told. Evelyn pressed a hand to her forehead. If I move everything, won't that just make us more of a target? It might in the short term, he said, but in the long term, the safest place for those assets is where they can be tracked, documented, and defended. What you keep at the house, that's where you'll stay vulnerable. She thought of her children sleeping in thin blankets, of the cold seeping in through the cracks, of men in the night probing her windows like they were testing the skin of a fruit. All right, she said. Tell me what I have to do. In the days that followed, Evelyn drove back and forth between the house and town, sometimes alone, sometimes with Lucas at her side. They carried the box in pieces, documents one day, jewelry in carefully wrapped bundles the next. At the bank, the manager's eyes widened slightly as he read the names on the accounts and deeds. At the attorney's office, signatures were added, seals stamped, electronic records reinforced what the paper already established. Each line signed was one more thread, tying Margaret's secret world to Evelyn's new life, in a way that could not easily be cut. But it also drew lines of another kind, lines that led straight back to the desert. Back at the house, the air grew more tense, like the charged stillness before a storm. Lucas slept lighter, waking at the smallest sound. Anna kept a notepad by her bed, sketching scenes of the house, the sky, the silhouettes of strangers at the edges of her imagination. Noah started double-checking the locks each night without being asked. Grace, too young to understand all of it, clung to Evelyn's side more than ever. One afternoon, as the sun dropped low and painted everything in long golden shadows, a familiar car pulled up at the edge of the property, a sleek, dark sedan that did not belong to any local farmer or neighbor. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, the setting sun in her eyes, watching as the driver's door opened and a tall figure emerged. Richard Whitmore. He closed the door with deliberate care, smoothing a wrinkle from his jacket, his expression a careful blend of concern and superiority. "Evelyn," he called out, as if dropping by for a social visit, "we need to talk." Behind her, inside the house, the floor creaked softly as one of the children moved closer to the door. Evelyn didn't turn. She kept her gaze on the man who had underestimated her one too many times. For the first time since she'd come to the desert, she did not feel small in front of a Whitmore. Tired, afraid, protective, yes, but not small. "You drove a long way," she said, her voice calm despite the tightness in her chest. "What is it you think you're going to find here?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Depends," he answered, "on what you've already found." The desert wind rose between them, carrying dust and the faint metallic scent of oncoming rain. The house behind her held everything that mattered, 4 children, and a fragile line of safety she was not willing to let anyone cross. This time she wouldn't face the Whitmores as a servant. She would face them as the woman their mother had chosen. The desert had revealed its secret, but with revelation came danger. Evelyn would have to risk everything, reputation, safety, even the fragile peace she'd built, to defend what was given to her. There would be one last choice, one last act of courage, and a new beginning born not from charity, but from justice. Richard stopped a few paces from the porch, dust curling around his polished shoes, as if the desert itself resented his presence. His gaze swept over the cracked adobe walls, the sagging roofline, the bare yard where Grace's small footprints marked the dirt like fragile constellations. "Mother always did have a taste for dramatics," he said, his eyes returning to Evelyn. "I'll admit, when I first heard she left you this place, I thought it was just another one of her jabs at us. But now?" He gave a small humorless smile. "Now I see there was more to it." Evelyn didn't move from the top step. The late afternoon sun burned against her back, casting her shadow long across the yard. Inside, she could sense the children watching through the thin curtains. Her voice when she spoke was calm. "What do you want, Richard?" "To fix a mistake," he replied. "Mother's mistake. She was unwell toward the end, sentimental, confused. She made decisions she didn't fully understand, especially when it came to you." "I took care of her for 13 years, Evelyn said. "Every day, every night. She knew exactly who I was." He studied her, then sighed as if disappointed by her refusal to accept his version of reality. "You've never been good at seeing the bigger picture. That's why I'm here. I'm going to offer you one last chance to walk away from something you are not equipped to control." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, lifting it slightly. "We know about the assets, Evelyn, the land, the accounts, the records tied to this place. You weren't discreet. Banks talk, lawyers talk. And out here?" He gestured to the horizon. "There's nothing else to talk about." Evelyn's heartbeat thudded in her ears, but she remained still. "Those assets were left to me," she said. "Your mother put my name on every document. I've confirmed that with legal counsel." "Legal counsel can be influenced," he replied. "Interpretations can change. Judges can be persuaded. Do you really want to drag 4 children through a battle you can't possibly afford?" He opened the folder, revealing papers with highlighted lines and sticky notes. "Here's my offer. You sign over controlling interest in the accounts and related holdings to me. In return, you keep the house and a lump sum that will be more than enough to move into town and live modestly for the rest of your life." "Modestly," she repeated, "while you take what your mother hid from you for a reason." Richard's jaw ticked once at that, a crack in his controlled facade. What she did was irrational. She forgot where loyalty truly lay. "No," Evelyn said quietly. She finally remembered. He exhaled, then tried a different angle. "Think about your children. Do you really believe they're safe here? You've already had visitors, haven't you? Men in trucks wandering around your windows at night. You think those were locals out for a friendly drive?" Her fingers curled around the edge of the porch railing. He was confirming what she already suspected, that her good fortune had become a scent in the air, drawing those who wanted a piece of it. "This is only going to get worse," Richard continued. "You can't protect them alone. But if you sign, I can make it stop. I'll handle everything. You'll have money, stability, distance from all of this. It's the smartest move you'll ever make." Evelyn let the silence stretch. The wind picked up, lifting strands of her hair and carrying them across her face. In that moment she saw 2 roads clearly. One was the road she'd walked her whole life, survival through submission, swallowing her pride, accepting what was offered, telling herself it was enough because there was no alternative. The other was new, terrifying, and jagged, but it was hers. "Before I answer," she said evenly, "you should know something. I took your mother's will and every document in that box to the attorney who has handled your family's affairs for years. He verified every transfer, every signature. I also filed those documents with local authorities and secured copies in places you can't touch just by making a phone call." For the first time, Richard's confidence faltered. "You went public?" he asked, voice sharpening. "Not public," she answered. "Protected. There's a difference. Enough people know now that if anything happens to me or to this house, there will be questions you can't bury." A flicker of anger flared in his eyes, quickly smoothed over. "You think a few papers will save you?" "No," she said. "I think the law will, and if it doesn't, the truth will." He closed the folder slowly, fingertips pressing into the cardboard. "You're overestimating how much the world cares about a widow in the desert." "Maybe," Evelyn said, "but you're underestimating how far a mother will go to protect her children." For a brief, charged moment, they simply stared at each other. Then his gaze shifted past her, toward the doorway, where he caught a glimpse of small faces pulling back from the curtain. "There's something else you're not thinking about," he said softly, his tone shifting into something colder. "Fear. Fear makes people sloppy. And out here, fear makes you alone." "I'm not alone," she replied. He smiled thinly. "You have 4 children and a broken house, Evelyn. That's not strength. That's weight." She could have argued. Instead, she simply stepped down one stair, closing the distance by an inch. "You should leave now," she said. "There's nothing here for you." He looked at her for a long moment, nose slightly wrinkled as if the air offended him. At last, he tucked the folder back under his arm. "This isn't over," he said. "I know," she answered, "but neither am I." He turned and walked back to the car, each step kicking up a small puff of dust. When he drove away, the trail he left behind twisted in the air like smoke, slowly thinning until the desert swallowed it. Evelyn stood there until the car disappeared completely. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Inside, the children waited for her in the main room. Lucas stood closest to the door, shoulders squared, as if he'd been ready to act if things went wrong. Anna held Grace's hand. Noah hovered near the table, his jaw tight. "Is he gone?" Lucas asked. "For now," Evelyn said. "Are they going to take the house?" Noah blurted, eyes wide. She stepped into the room and knelt so she could look them all in the eyes. "No one is taking anything from us without a fight," she said softly. "Your mother didn't go through everything she did just to hand it over when someone raised their voice." Anna searched her face. "But what if they come back?" "They might," Evelyn said. "But we won't be here forever. This house was where the secret started. It doesn't have to be where our lives stay." That night, after the children finally drifted off to sleep, Evelyn sat at the small table with the attorney on speakerphone. They went through options, step by step: formal notices, restraining orders, legal statements reinforcing the validity of the transfers. The attorney assured her that what Margaret had done was unusual, but not illegal. The true danger now wasn't the courts, it was intimidation. "We can protect your rights," he said. "But you need to think about what you want your life to look like 6 months from now, a year from now. Staying in that house gives them a point of pressure." He didn't have to say the rest. In the days that followed, the decision took shape in her mind, not all at once but like a photograph developing slowly in a darkroom. She watched the children do homework by lantern light, listened to the desert wind press against the windows, felt every cold draft and saw every crack in the walls. The house had given them a secret. But now the secret was out there, anchored in documents and vaults and legal records that no longer depended on these walls. The house had done its job. It was time for them to do theirs. By the end of the month, the first major transfer was complete. One of the smaller properties was sold through the attorney's firm. The proceeds moved into an account solely in her name. With that, Evelyn did something she had never imagined she'd do. She bought a house, not a mansion. Not anything out of reach of the people she had always been. Just a simple, sturdy home in a nearby town, 3 bedrooms, working electricity, running water, and a small yard where Grace could plant whatever flowers the desert would allow. The school was within walking distance. The neighbors were close enough to wave to, but not close enough to peer into their windows. On the last morning at the desert house, the sky was soft and pale, the air cooler than usual. The children moved through the rooms slowly, each in their own way saying goodbye. Anna traced her fingers along the wall where the crack had once been, now patched carefully. Noah stood by the window where they used to watch the stars. Lucas checked the locks one last time, an old habit he didn't seem ready to release. Grace tugged at Evelyn's sleeve. "Are we really leaving?" she asked. "Yes," Evelyn said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "But this place will still be here. Just for something new." Because she had made another decision, one that surprised even her. Instead of selling the desert house for profit or abandoning it to fall back into silence, she signed it over to a small local organization that worked with struggling families and widows. The attorney had connected her with them after hearing her story. It would become a retreat of sorts, a place for women who had lost everything to come, rest, and rebuild under the open sky. The house would be reinforced, its cracks mended, its roof strengthened, its history quietly honored. On the day she met with the woman who ran the project, the director listened to her story with damp eyes and steady hands. "You could have turned this into more money," the woman said. "Are you sure about this?" Evelyn glanced around at the small, battered house that had changed her life. The wind moved gently through the brush, softer now, almost kind. "This place gave me the chance to save my children," she said. "I wanted to give that chance to other people too." The papers were signed. When they drove away for the last time, the children watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror. No one spoke for a while. Then, quietly, Noah said, "It kind of feels like we're leaving a part of us behind." Evelyn glanced at him in the mirror. "We're leaving the part that had to survive," she said. "We're taking the part that gets to live." Their new home, when they pulled up in front of it, wasn't spectacular by the world's standards. The paint was a little faded, the yard patchy, but to Evelyn, it looked like something holy. A real front door that didn't stick, windows that opened and shut without a fight, a small kitchen where she could picture Sunday mornings with pancakes instead of rushed coffee and exhaustion. Bedrooms where each child could have a corner that belonged only to them. They carried boxes inside, laughing when Noah almost dropped one, groaning when Lucas discovered just how heavy the books were. As evening fell, they stood together in the living room, the overhead light casting a warm glow across their faces. They had beds. They had food. They had a future that wasn't balanced on the whim of someone else's wealth. That night, after dinner at a real table and the first hot showers they'd had in weeks, the children gathered around Evelyn on the worn but comfortable couch. "Are we safe now?" Grace asked sleepily, her head resting on Evelyn's shoulder. "We're safer," Evelyn said. "Safe isn't a place that never has problems. It's a place where, when problems come, you're not facing them alone." "Will they stop trying to take it?" Anna asked. "All of it?" "Maybe not right away," Evelyn admitted. "People don't like to let go of what they think should be theirs. But we have the law on our side now. And more than that, we have the truth. Your father used to say that the truth might not win fast, but it wins deep." Lucas watched her closely. "Do you regret staying with Mrs. Whitmore all those years?" he asked quietly. "Missing so much. With us?" The question landed softly but heavily. Evelyn took a breath. In her mind she saw hospital rooms, midnight alarms, Margaret's lined face twisted in pain, then softened by late confessions. She also saw birthday candles blown out without her, shaky homemade cards sent to the estate, little faces pixelated through old phone screens. "Every missed moment hurt," she said. "There were days I hated where I was, but if I had walked away sooner, I don't know where we'd be now. Sometimes the roads that break us are the ones that lead us where we were meant to go." She brushed a strand of hair from Grace's face. "If there's anything I regret, it's how alone I let you feel while I was trying to keep us all afloat. I can't change that, but I can be here now, really here." Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes shining. The house settled around them with small, familiar creaks. The good kind. The kind that meant wood and nails and history, not weakness. Outside, instead of the endless, isolating desert, there were other houses, other lights. A sense of being part of a world instead of stranded beyond it. Later that week, they stood together at a small ceremony out by the old desert house. A handful of community members, the project director and the attorney gathered as a simple plaque was placed near the front step. No grand speeches, just a few carefully chosen words about second chances, hidden strength, and the strange ways generosity sometimes disguises itself as hardship. On the drive back, as the sky turned a soft wash of purple and gold, Evelyn looked at her children and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Not just relief, belonging. Back home that evening, as they were settling into their new routines, Lucas turned off the television and faced his mother. "Mom," he said, You should tell this story, not just to us, to other people, so they know that staying loyal doesn't always mean staying broken. She smiled faintly. You think people would want to hear it? I know they would, he said. There are a lot of people out there like you. They need to know it's okay to hold on, and it's okay to let go when it's time. Evelyn exhaled slowly, the weight of the past 13 years settling into something lighter, something like purpose. Maybe I will, she said. She looked at each of them, memorizing their faces in this new light. Not the harsh glow of hospital fluorescence, not the dim strain of lanterns in a house that threatened to collapse, but the simple, ordinary light of a home where tomorrow didn't feel like a threat. She drew them closer one by one, until they were all there, pressed together in a tangle of arms and quiet breathing. Listen to me, she said softly. There will be days when life feels unfair again. When people think they can decide what you deserve, when it seems like you've been left out in the middle of nowhere with nothing. She waited until each pair of eyes met hers. But remember this, sometimes what feels like abandonment is really the beginning of our salvation. It's where we figure out who we are when no one's watching. It's where we find the strength that other people never believed we had. She brushed a tear from her cheek, surprised by it, but unashamed. Lealdade y perseveranza, she said slowly, letting the words roll off her tongue before translating for them. Loyalty and perseverance, they don't always pay quickly, but they pay deep. And one day, when everything feels fragile, you'll stand up like we did, and realize you're still here. And that's where everything new begins. Grace pressed her face into Evelyn's side. I like this house, she murmured. It feels like it's smiling. Evelyn looked around. Yes, for the first time the walls did not feel like a cage or a test. They felt like shelter, a place not given out of pity or held over her head like a favor, a place she had claimed, defended, and transformed, a place where, at last, she was not just surviving someone else's story, she was living her own. If Evelyn's journey touched you, share this story and subscribe to the channel. Every new subscription helps bring more powerful stories of courage, injustice overcome, and unexpected redemption to people who need to hear them. Your support helps keep these voices alive and reminds countless others that even in the harshest deserts, there is always a hidden path to a new beginning.